Peachy and I were co-instructors in the Certified Digital Marketer program, where we collaborated on courses on disruptive innovation and digital leadership way back in 2014. She's best known as the CEO of ad firm Ogilvy and Mather in the Philippines, and also founded the Just League, a talent lending bank for fourth sector enterprises. Peachy also started an inclusive archery school called Archer 42. Today, she's based in Singapore as the Master's Program Director at Hyper Island, a creative business school founded in Sweden. Welcome to Data Ethics Conversations. Today, I speak with Ms. Peachy Pacquing. We will talk to Peachy about the intersection of leadership and ethics, the value of business ethics to corporations, and redefining creativity in the fourth industrial revolution. If you enjoy this conversation, please like it on Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter at EthicsPH, and on LinkedIn at DataEthicsPH. And now, my conversation with Ms. Peachy Pacquing.
Yes, Doc. It seems like it's been ages since we collaborated last. I left the Philippines and to join this school. I actually graduated from. So I took my master's in digital management at Hyper Island here in Singapore. And little did I know that I would end up being part of the school, which I feel is really where I should be right now. After spending maybe 2-3 decades in the marketing communications industry, I felt I needed something to do that was more was speaking more to why I do things, and I guess if you want to call it purpose, if you want to call it plotting out your ikigai, I think this is really the outcome of a lot of soul searching and saying, given what I can do, how can I do it? And I still feel good about it every single morning when I get out of bed. So I am in education. I am in continuing and executive education. I am the master's program director at Hyper Island. I basically oversee the transformation of our students from the moment they sign up for the program, go through the program, and leave the school. My personal hope is that each and every graduate of Hyper Island becomes a beacon of hope. That's what I would listen to, a beacon of hope and justice. And that might be a big ask. Digital business school in Singapore, but I am one to not shy away from dreaming big. So that's why I'm here, and that's why I do what I do.
We kind of let's talk a little bit more about Hyper Island. No? It's very interesting that you, from just being a student, you're now partly running the school already. What kind of students do you attract? And I mean, does data and ethics come up at all in any of your subjects? Would be interesting to know, no?
Okay, that's two questions. What kind of students do we attract? It's very hard to answer in one question, in one profile, because every single crew is made up of a really diverse group of students. And you would have students who come because they're wondering what's beyond the visible horizon and what role can they play in the world beyond what they're currently doing now. So these if you say this segment of learners are driven by wonder and also being you might say a part of it is being adventurous and trying to see what's out there. Then you have a group of people who have risen up to senior or middle management in the digital 2.0 before we pre and so the vocabulary, the tools, the skill sets uh, are need updating. Not to say that they no longer have relevant skills, but they themselves recognize that in order to thrive and to deliver value moving forward, they should be updating their own skill sets, mindsets, and maybe even the way they look at the world. Then the third group are those who actually have founded companies, have become CEO twice over, and are now looking for what's next for me. I'm not quite over yet. I still feel I could contribute a lot. So I call them the second mountain climbers. I think there's an article somewhere that says these are the people who have climbed one mountain, scaled one mountain, and now are looking for the next mountain to scale. So, so we have a lot, and we have foreign students. We have very, I would say, students who could be my the age of my eldest child, uh, and so it's a very diverse group. So that's the kind of student that comes to Hyper Island. And I suppose I somewhere in that description of uh, of personas, I I I sort of snuck in there. The second question was, does data and ethics even come up? We all understand the importance of data. I think we are drivers of the thought that the decisions have to be informed by data. So that's something critical in terms of the understanding of how to solve problems. We teach the students to become critical thinkers, and therefore it's hard to become a critical thinker when it's all conjecture and opinion and assumptions. So we we have a bias for data driven decisions, and in fact we even have course called data driven decision making. Ethics, on the other hand, I think there's an article that came out once, and it said that we exercise ethics like a muscle. So maybe, as you said in an earlier conversation, maybe ethics wasn't really thought about a lot back then. It's that one muscle in your body, perhaps, that is there but is not getting any exercise. As we run module after module, I realized that the weight on having an ethical point of view and understanding the ethical consequences of your recommendation gets more and more considered. And I'm very happy to see that happening right now. So data and ethics definitely, um, they probably don't sound sexy to some, these two subject topics, but they're they're embedded in everything we teach.
Yeah, I agree with you that ethics is not really, I mean, speaking from experience, not really that common in lalo na in business. Legal, the law is more common. People follow regulations, but ethical conversations tend to be quite murky. Especially, for example, in my case, I spent the better part of my of my youth studying in a Catholic school. So when you talk about ethics, it's normally driven by morality lessons, no, and Catholic catechism. So it's interesting how, I mean, if I were to use my own journey in the corporate world, after you get out of school, you don't have any more parang pegs, no, of what constitutes ethical behavior outside of, let's say, church, no, and the law. And then now what we're seeing is it seems to go beyond that now, no. Ethics, morality, and the law are actually mutually, well, maybe there's some overlap, but they're like legitimate conversations in their own right, no. I don't know if you were ever familiar with the ethisphere. You heard of the ethisphere?
Oh no,
Yeah.
we have to look that up.
Yeah. So actually, I'll take this opportunity to show you something. No? So the Ethisphere is an NGO, and what they do is they track a list of what they call the most ethical companies in the world. No? and you cannot nominate yourself, which is good, in the sense that you have to be nominated by your partners, or your suppliers, your customers, and I'm sure they have a criteria. No. Anyway, long story short, I wanted to flag it to you because I wanted to hear your view on this as an educator. The ethisphere kasi has been going on for maybe quite some time na, no? Maybe since the mid 2000s. So it's
Oh,
so the list has been around for a while, and some people go in the list, some people drop off the list. And I'll flash you parang an article like came around, no, sa ethisphere. Now, it's interesting about this ethisphere since the list has been around for some time. Um, some researchers actually took it upon themselves to do some research on it. No, okay, if we have this list of ethical companies, I wonder if there is a difference between their performance in the market compared to kind of the performance of companies in general. No, so I'll flash this very briefly so maybe you can
yeah.
react to this. No.
Let's see if I recognize some of the companies.
Yeah. So ang ginawa nila, this was so this is not an updated
Yes.
version of it, no. But the I don't have the actual list, no. We can dig it up shortly after this, but I'll show you the paper muna, no. So this is the Ethisphere as of 2018. And then back in when was this? Back in 2012, sino ang these researchers, no, si Dr. Arial and Carvalho from Portugal, the University of Minho, no, they said that, okay, now that we have this list, why don't we test if there is a difference in how ethical companies as defined by the ethisphere performed, no, over the broad market. So parang sige, let's put this ethics to the test, no. And I'll just summarize the results, no. What they found was over a 13-year period, the list of ethical companies actually outperformed the market in general by a compounded annual rate of, this is financial performance, of 8.33% per annum, and with a p-value of less than 1.8%, no. So parang they found that, kasi it's interesting, the reason why I keep going back to this particular story is normally when you talk about ethics, it gets sometimes conflated with the law, no, and regulation. And people think of ethics as something that will attract penalties. If you're unethical, you can go to jail or you get fined. So it's always with the air of cost avoidance or loss avoidance. Let's be ethical, otherwise we get punished.
Yeah.
But this particular study kind of turned that around na, well, if you're ethical, or at least as far as the ethisphere is concerned, you're actually going to do better in terms of business. There's actually an upside for you, no? And there was another point in this paper which I'll provide you right after this talk, no? These are the common parang characteristics. Kasi nagulat sila. They were not expecting to see financial outperformance. And they said, why is this the case, no? And they found some common characteristics between yung mga, the companies normally nominated for the ethisphere. These are the top four, no? Usually they have a very good reputation. They manage their stakeholders very well. They have a very strong set of organizational values, no? I mean, this is something you rarely hear outside of business school or or school in general, no? And most importantly, I think, especially with the ongoing pandemic, the fourth characteristic is they tend to be resilient in times of crises. Yeah, and that's born out of numerous factors, no? Like their employees are normally very loyal. They're willing to put the company and the collective needs ahead of their own, no, so that the whole thing survives, no. And for example, issues like taking a temporary pay cut so that the company can survive, a cash flow challenge, because there is such a strong sense of value and loyalty, among the employees. Management does not need to demand it. It's open, no, openly happening. And I found that really interesting because you rarely hear about stories like this, no, in the business world, no, like you know, uh, suddenly may in Tagalog, no, may malasakit yung mga employees, no, for the companies, no. So I don't know if this is news to you or how do you react to this, no? I just thought of bringing it up kasi you talked about educating mga executives or people looking for that next leg, no, in their career. No, does this resonate at all with some of your findings in your
It does.
journey?
you know what, a couple of things. We just finished the last business transformation module, and so much is said about business transformation, digital transformation, and all that. But Hyper Island decided that this time around, we're not just going to talk about business transformation in general, but put a stake in the ground. Because when you start to when you deliberately search for the future of business, what will, what will, what will greet you, what you will be inundated with, is that purpose-driven organizations are poised better to survive in the future. And this is exactly what you are sharing. So there is an alignment in what you have found and what we are actually teaching. Of course, it wasn't an easy sell because you have very seasoned professionals in the crew, and they would say, oh, but we do our CSRs, you know, CSR, and we had to make a point that it's no longer about CSR. It's no long and I apologize to whoever is listening, but this is from experience. CSR used to be something that was outsourced to PR agencies, and we used to have a PR department. Okay, and what we're saying is we're moving from CSR to CSV, which is creating shared value. And shared value affects your business model. It's not just a line in your spreadsheet that says, "Oh, we donated X and such." You know, it has to be integral in your business model, and and not for show, but because you fundamentally believe in doing the right thing. So we studied businesses like Ben and Jerry's. We studied businesses like Patagonia, Salesforce, and all of these companies who decide to be very clear on their purpose and their ethical stand in today's society, and it just validates your figure here that says it tends to outperform. If you look at Ben and Jerry's shares at a certain point, particularly when they were very clear about their purpose and their beliefs, that's when they were strongest. But you will also see some companies that say that I give up. I cannot change the industry. And that's a fair statement because it doesn't, to change the industry or to turn the juggernaut is will take a whole lot of effort from everyone and not just a few companies that keep on popping up when you mention purpose-driven organizations. It must be widespread, and that's really culture change more than anything, and that's very difficult. And speaking of culture change, I used to sit on the board of a manufacturing company, a FMCG company. Uh, it was food, and I realized that ethics is really how should I say, compartmentalized in compliance. So when you talk about the law, when you talk about regulation, I think we are still very narrow in our appreciation of ethics when we run businesses. And we think as long we will have to do the ethical thing because that's the compliant thing to do. But ethics is far reaching, more pervasive and far reaching than just in the compliance arena. And I don't know if a lot of companies are recognizing that and actually revisiting how things are done in terms of how ethical are we as a company. It's interesting, Doc, that you mentioned this because I before our call, before our chat, I said I'm actually studying right now. The two things I'm studying right now is moral leadership and ethical policy. So those are the, because I feel, and this is beyond my role at Hyper Island, but I feel if this is something that we feel incredibly passionate about, that we we graduate students who have a very keen sense of what is right and what is wrong, and that They know how to create things that very cognizant of its consequences, ethical consequences in the world, then we would have done our job. So yes, so that's my reflection on the bit that you've shared earlier.
Yeah, I was just digging up what you were sharing. No, so this is the website now. No, the world's most ethical companies.com. According to them, the 5-year premium na for the ethisphere is 13.5%. No, and honestly, if I'm gonna reflect, it feels weird quantifying ethics because it's not something you're used to quantifying. And then there's a list here of the previous honorees. No, and like I said, you can't nominate yourself. No, you have to be nominated by your partners or by your customers. So there is an element of kind of that kind of diligence. No, it's not an award that you would normally buy. No, that's not like some awards are for sale. No? Another thing I want to point out, buti na lang, ano, you mentioned this also, is it feels weird to quantify ethics, but then on the opposite side of the spectrum, you have yung CSR. No, you mentioned that, and one thing that and it's interesting that you said the PR companies no do that CSR. Another thing I want to point out that might be kind of a uncomfortable truth is some of the biggest CSR spending comes from companies who actually in a way do damage to society. You know, like companies that pollute the environment, companies that produce sin products like tobacco and alcohol. So there's a latent, I would say, ethical dilemma. No, now you're promoting addictive products that actually end up eating the social fabric. No, uh, and then they compensate for this with their CSR spending. So on the one hand, there's this discomfort with quantifying ethics, and then on the other hand, you have this parang explicit parang I don't know if overcompensation or compensation for, I would say, an ethical business. Call it a spade through CSR spending. So anyway, the crux of it is, I think we might I don't have an alternative, no, but right now we kind of have a tendency of valuing damage to society in economic terms. And that's for me really, I don't think it's a perfect system. Kasi if you always reduce everything to, okay, I hurt you, here's some money, go away and be happy, something like that. Or you see it happening on a more broader note, let's say with the ongoing pandemic, no? And the debate is, do we open up the economy and save business? But the cost is X number of people will get sick because of COVID. So we're forcing this dichotomy, no, na health or economics, no, health or money, diba? Ethics or money. And it's I think one of these things that we need to start to consciously solve for, no, at some level, no, because there's a limit to what you can compensate economically, no? I mean, I want to bring it back to your role as an educator. No, do you have those questions whenever you deal with your students, or is this something that you deal with in terms of moral leadership? Parang there's this parang latent uh, need, no, to, on the one hand, you have to put a number on it, but the number won't be enough as a way of of managing that kind of problem.
I think it redounds to the values of those in leadership. I Without naming names, there are companies that have computed have projected the cost of damage and put that against the potential profit, and we have seen how it's okay to commit a quote unquote, okay to commit a sin. Let's just pay for it and then let's go our merry way. It has been inputted in it's like it's like they say in bigger malls, the cost of shoplifting is already inputted in the cost of loss, and it's in your P&L. So that's the cost of doing business. uh, we will damage the environment. What's the penalty? How much is that? There's a criticism on how big or how small the penalties are for certain companies. That's just a drop in the bucket of the profits that they make. If you're going to penalize these tech companies, make it really hurt, because right now it's laughable, the fines and the penalties that we that are being slapped on these companies are laughable in the grand scheme of things. So it's just another cost item on your P&L, right? So now in relation to our students, um, we're operating in this world right now, and I wouldn't say this is the world that's ideal, that there are ethics are considered. So we're always thinking, how can we make things better? How can we have better conversations? If we can't change the world because it's just too big an endeavor, what are the small actions we can do as individuals? Um, so that's the struggle that the students are faced with. Like, one example, um, we have a student who just graduated, and her thesis is a game, a card game that that facilitates an ethical discussion among tech designers. Because as it is, tech designers just do what they're asked to do. Here's the brief. We have to create this app, so on and so forth, and just do it, right? So she took a step back and said, there is no room to reflect on the consequences of our actions. So what I could do is facilitate conversation and get them to actively think about the consequences of their designs, their actions. I think at one point I wrote about dark patterns and all that. So that's the one, and I love these baby steps. I know they're tiny steps towards us becoming more ethical in our ways of working, in the way we run businesses. But at least it's a step, as opposed to just ignoring the fact that we have a problem and just going our merry way. So I think that's how the school and the students are responding. What is it within my capacity to? And I love this line, although it sounds so copywriter-ish. It's a rewrite the wrong, because I think that everyone has the ability and the capacity to rewrite the wrong in the smallest way possible. um, whether it's in your choices of what you buy, what social media platforms you're on, everything you have a choice. You have a way to influence things. We always say, start with your circle of influence, even if that circle is just a circle of one. That's where you should start. Yeah, so I'm not so sure if I answered your question, but that's how we are responding.
No,
In
that's
Yeah,
perfect. Actually, ano nga, it's prompting another query, no? Uh, do you see a change or a shift compared to the time when we were doing our kind of our collaboration years ago, and even back in the day, when you were actively running agencies and companies? Uh, do you see a shift in the type of leadership being employed as opposed to kind of the prototypal leaders you encounter now? And the reason why, to contextualize that question, is we talk about trends like the fourth industrial revolution as something very pervasive. It affects everything. I'm sure malamang leadership is also fair game, no? It's being rewritten by the fourth industrial revolution as we speak. But no one's actually explicitly, I mean, explained it, no? But could there be anecdotal parang evidence, no? From your perspective, no? Over the years, no? Have you seen like a change or in attitudes or behaviors or even intent when it comes to leaders?
I can only speak about what I know, Doc, and I can talk about the leadership at Hyper Island, Singapore, because I felt it. I felt it. I've experienced it, and yes, I would say our MD behaved in a way that I probably wouldn't have behaved as when I was leading an agency. Because when I when I was in leadership, the metrics were different. You know, the metrics were about, let's make sure that we keep a certain profit margin, etc., etc. And I don't know how. That's why I don't want to speak about things I don't know. I don't know how leadership is in other companies, but I saw how we were all, to your point earlier about ethical leadership and about us. We were all willing to 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 take a pay cut if it was necessary. It wasn't something big and dramatic. We all knew it automatically, because our managing director said our position is, rather than lose one person, uh, let's see how we can um, uh, sort of adjust our salary scales in order to make sure that no one loses their job. And that's all the way through to the temporary auntie who cleans our campus like 3 times a month. Even if we weren't using the campus, she was still employed by Hyper Island. So in the past, we would have chopped all of these things that were not necessary. Nobody needs the campus. We don't need an auntie cleaning the campus. Let's get rid of the auntie. But no, we kept the auntie. We kept everyone. And I'm just so grateful at the turn of events that 20 2020 was the best year ever in terms of performance at Hyper Island. I mean, maybe I'm exaggerating. Around the time I was here, because it was serendipitous that the government suddenly funded the upskilling of its citizens, and therefore we benefited from that. Um, and so we were very, very busy, which was good. Busy was good, and we survived it, and we lived to fight another day. We didn't trim the staff. We didn't trim salaries. We didn't even trim the days we were supposed to come to the office. But we were already, because the guiding principle was no one was going to be redundated. No one was going to be let go. So that's why I can only speak for what I know. But having said that, when I read certain articles, like there are certain tech leaders who take from their salaries a significant amount of portion, so they could give every individual no less than $70,000, making sure no one gets redundated. So I see it happening elsewhere. um, and Doc, there's this. Um, we also teach this at Hyper Island, that new business values require new organizational structures, and I will send you this structure called TEAL. I don't know exactly what it stands for, but it's supposed to be the organizational structure for a more enlightened business leader. So we are evolving. We are evolving as a business, as a race. Technology is driving a great deal of that evolution. So we cannot adhere to the old ways of looking at things. The hierarchical, and I might this might be controversial to those in hierarchical organizations, but the hierarchical model of leadership is currently being challenged. Yeah, and I think you see that the effect of that is there are lots of people being let go in that hierarchy, because suddenly maybe this senior middle is no longer important. Maybe the interaction should be from junior to senior. So in the effort of optimizing costs. Yeah, so that's my perspective on, is leadership changing? Definitely this class I'm taking, there are a number of students taking it, and from all walks of life. You're a doctor, you're someone from agriculture. It's changing because we find that the old leadership models are sadly wanting.
I mean, talking about adversity, you mentioned that uh, I mean, the companies that are weathering the crisis are the ones, no, who are in a way banding closer together. No, employees are caring about it. I just thought about. Do you still keep tabs on kind of the industry that you left behind? No, obviously during the pandemic, one of the first expenses to go would be marketing or advertising costs. No, so any thoughts about how that sector is doing? I mean, clearly people aren't buying ads as much as they used to. Billboards are bare, well, at least back in the height of the lockdowns, and spots on TV. Lalo na with the demise of one of the biggest networks, it couldn't have been a rosy picture. No, I mean, I could be wrong. No, but do you
I
keep tabs on them or any updates on how they're doing?
I'll start off by saying that industry has treated me very well. That industry has taught me so much and given me so much. And I walked away from the industry with a very full and grateful heart. Okay. Having said that, I I don't really keep close tabs on the industry, but I have many friends who are practically family from the industry who share news. So this is all anecdotal. um, I kid around na I'm probably ninang to like half the industry. That's how many friends who have become family uh, are for me. So I hear anecdotes from a lot of people saying it's been very tough. A lot of agencies have how do you, the politically correct term is right sized. Yeah, so have right sized and and I know people personally who have been furloughed and people who've been asked to leave their jobs, whether you're a group business director or the company driver for how many decades. I've heard stories. They write to me. They reach out to me. So that's the view I get. Um, and of course my heart goes out to them, but I can't do much for them except to to help them in any capacity I can. Depends on what they're asking for, really.
Yeah, you're right. Well, ako naman, from my perspective, syempre, I also relate. But at the same time, I remember I don't know, when we were working together, our thoughts were always that the industry is doing so well that the need to innovate is secondary. They're making money on kind of the old methods. Clients are also asking for old methods, so it's also hard to get clients to move, no? And that was always you remember we were having breakfast about this and saying that how do you move people to, let's say, digital, for example, when traditional works very well? And we were always saying that, well, it will take a disruption, external shock, no, to get everyone to move, no. Of course, we would not wish a pandemic on anyone, but it just so happens that it was one of those mechanisms, no, that we see, no. And I think that applies across the board, no. I wouldn't have thought that a virus would be the mechanism that the fourth industrial revolution would emerge from, diba? Parang suddenly where everyone's now comfortable doing video conferences, everything. If you're not on online payments, that's suicide. No, your business is over if you're not into delivery, and if you're still reliant on physical branches. I mean, to be fair, it will probably bounce back eventually. But wow, no, 1 year or maybe even two, or as some reports are saying, 7 years, given the vaccination rates globally, it'll be at least 7 years before we're back to wherever we came from.
There's a
That's a bit long for any business to weather, right?
view that it will not go back to normal. You will have periods of normalcy, but the virus is still there. So it just takes one person to reinfect the world. So it might be, I think it was from, I forget which consultancy it was, on and off. 2 months on, 1 month off, 2 months on. So we'll be having this intermittent. That's another view because
Yeah,
I don't think you can 100% rid the world of the virus.
yeah.
Um, uh, yes. So I remember that disruption you were saying, and we did talk about that. We said because people are still receiving their bonuses, because people are still, that's why there's no impetus to change really.
Nope.
Um, and here we go. And who would have thought?
And I remember one of the, I know, talking about one of the tropes, no, if you're working in a marketing function or an advertising function, or you attend a Digicon, for example, one of the usual tropes is, okay, this is now the millennial customer, diba? And as opposed to the Gen X and the Boomer. And, it's just a rehash. I mean, my view is it's always a rehash. What we attributed to millennials couple of years ago, they attributed that to the Gen X, the MTV generation, and then now we're attributing it to Gen Z. However, here's an interesting perspective. When you see Gen Z, most of them are coming of age during the pandemic, no? And you have the next generation, naman, the kids of the millennials are coming of age also. They'll be coming of age in a totally alien world, a world that parang it's almost even more radical than the transition from no internet to internet, which was the millennial generation, and to a certain extent the late Gen X. You could tell now, okay, you are natively digital, and now you're pre-digital. That was the divide, and now we're gonna have pre-pandemic and pandemic. You're natively a pandemic citizen. Any early thoughts on that? Like, what kind of habits are you detecting? Maybe from your, I know, even your own family, or people you've met in school. No.
Well, I don't know. Well, I know what the value of pre-pandemic and post-pandemic is, because now, I mean, I reflected a lot, and 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 what that has the significant effect on me was I am very clear about what is important and what is not important. Every single thing I buy now, I say, do I really need this? I mean, when I'm going to be locked down na naman for 1 year, right? Do I really need this? So I'm very deliberate about my purchases. And now my purchases are towards these classes that I take, because I want to become a better person. I want to know more so I can be able to help more people, as opposed to I need a new pair of shoes because my old shoes doesn't match the new outfit I bought. So it's different now. It's different. Now the point on marketing and packaging all of these things, I think that's what you're alluding to, that perhaps it's just all marketing packaging. um, there is that, I see that, but I also have to give caution to those who package this, keep on packaging it this way. uh, what I do see firsthand, and maybe an effect of the pandemic, or the effect of being growing up in the Bush era. I'm sorry, the Trump era, or all of these things that are happening. Black Lives Matter. Gen Z is not going to be like any other generation we've come across in terms of marketing and advertising, because fundamentally they don't like advertising, right? They don't like being BS'd. Um,
There's, yeah, in many ways there's an aversion nga to it. Eh.
yes,
Anything that feels like it's parang there's a wrapper to it. No, people say no, don't give me that. Give me something more authentic. No.
in my in in the school, I always say, can we be clear on the vocabulary we use, because sometimes the words are no longer relevant. So let's go meta, or let's go philosophical here. What is advertising anyway, right? What is marketing anyway? So is it still marketing, or are we subscribing to a marketing concept that is actually, it's not marketing anymore? It's about getting people to like you in the most authentic way possible, with the least amount of annoying messages. And I don't know how that fits into the models that the industry currently uses. No. um, I think we have to go back to the fundamental definition. Like, I think some people still believe digital is a channel. Uh, I still have conversations saying digital as a channel. Um, I believe that we have to start deeply introspecting and really asking ourselves, why do we exist? And I'm not to be all airy fairy or fluffy about it, is what value do we give this world? And if we're clear on that, and if we feel that's an ad, I will challenge you.
Or even the definition of creativity, no? That's another contentious, ano. Parang ano, I remember, I think you might have even reacted to this, no? Another post on, obviously LinkedIn is becoming the anti-Facebook Facebook, parang ganun, ano. And you see these posts, no? One contentious one was about, uh, somebody drew parang a dichotomy between coding and creativity. Parang you don't have to be creative when you code because being a coder is very straightforward. And of course, I felt compelled to react na, but coding is just a tool. You need creativity to code well.
Sure,
I mean,
no, for
there's no
sure.
way you can code anything decently and be robotic about it. No,
Here we go again with our basic definitions. If you do not know what your if you do not know what creativity is, like I think that the word creativity there is misused or misrepresented, because creativity is the ability to connect things and create something that's new and compelling and involving. So you can connect things. And if GitHub is any indication, my goodness,
that's your canvas. GitHub is
that's creativity. You take someone's code, but if you don't understand how to code, you can't connect his code with his code. You can't build on his code. That's creativity. I think we have a very, very narrow definition of creativity, and the tone of my voice is getting higher.
Am I triggering you? Sorry.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are. Because these are conversations I wish we had more often and more
Back in the day.
openly, because then we start thinking critically. What do we mean by creativity? Is it in the realm of what we used to of how we used to define creativity in the 20th century? Well, someone says being a scientist is creative because you're exploring the unknown. That's
Yeah.
creative work.
Yeah.
Being a
Actually,
doctor
a
is
lot of
creative.
people, obviously, I'm not a mathematician, but I've used math. No? If you talk to like true mathematicians, theoretical physicists, it's pure creativity for you to start dreaming up these complex structures, no? That you can't even see with your naked eye, no? I mean, if that's not creativity, I don't know what is, no? Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's multi ano kasi, it's multi-prong, no? I mean, there's no X to Y spectrum na ito hindi creative, ito creative. It's actually quite
I
diverse, no?
think we should really watch ourselves and caution each other that we do not use words that are convenient for us to use for our purposes or our beliefs, because we have to have a shared understanding of what it is, so you don't get into that discussion of coding is not creative.
Yep.
So
Yep.
that's a non-argument if if you understand the words you are using.
Yeah, that's so true. And it's there's so many analogous arguments. Like obviously there's one world where okay, you can't be creative if you're not given the rubber stamp of some award or some body. The same phenomena exists in other fields, no? Even let's talk about data science, no? There is a and I wish it would be moderated in a way, no, because there's an ongoing current of credentialism is a strong one in the data science field. And it's funny because uh, the pioneers in the field are probably less credentialed than what you would normally think, no? It's a very heavy term kasi when you say, oh, someone is a scientist, no? And of course, that is a profession. Then the same way being called a creative, it's actually a job title in many agencies. Ang daming, it's conflated a lot. Now, the reason why I'm bringing this up, apart from I hope I didn't trigger you too much, is there's an ethical imperative to this as well because semantics play a big deal in ethics. No? When you call the expression calling a spade, that's an ethical dilemma, right? Because you can label it many ways, and many labels can carry many meanings. And as you said, there's a need to go back to basics, call a spade, and then react accordingly. And marketing is just probably the most explicit parang field, no, or arena where expression can take various forms. But it seems to be affecting all other fields, no? Yeah, I agree. GitHub is a canvas. The people on it are just,
Point of credentialing, Doc, my practical experience with that was I used to run a an archery school
yeah, you're right. Archery, right?
for children who learn differently. Okay, that's a euphemism for children with learning difficulties. So the argument there, the interesting conversation I had was who had the right to be called a coach? Someone who actually knows how to shoot uh, and has joined competitions and has excelled in competitions, or someone who took a course and was certified coach level one, but hasn't had any um, competition experience. So who will make a better coach? So that's a very interesting because I was going to be hiring. I was hiring coaches, and of course I wanted the best for the children. I wanted the best for the learners. But I realized that because I was operating my archery school within the university, that instead of us being able to take on some of the students in the university, we couldn't because our coaches weren't certified. But for all intents and purposes, our coaches were more than capable of teaching. So I would say that it's there are different views. There's the view of experience, and there's the view of being accredited as one. And it really depends on what you feel, what value. I will always go back to what is the value, because sometimes we hide. There might be some people who hide behind accreditation or certification and can't really practice, if you know what I mean. And there are those who have been practicing and learning it, but didn't have the opportunity to get accredited. So I don't know if I'm talking about the same thing, but this is just my experience when you mentioned credentialing. And
Yeah, I think it's also the way I would view it, complementary to yours, is um, it'll depend on the domain where you practice. At some level, maybe I don't even know if it's a function of how old the practice is or how novel, but there are certain areas of practice, let's say software engineering, no, where credentials almost don't matter. It's all about your ability to execute, no? There are a lot of really good developers who don't even have a college degree, no? And they're the best at their field. And then you have maybe some of the more traditional domains like the law and regulated domains, where not only should you finish a certain degree, you have to pass some sort of an exam, and you have to maintain a license, and you have to be talagang the credentialism is like piled on top of each other, no? And then there's the middle ground, no? Where maybe a lot of the contentious discussions happen, no? uh, you know, uh, Advertising is one area, data science is another area. They're kind of half and half. There are people who are like, oh, I didn't come from the right schools, I didn't take the right courses, but whenever I do a campaign, viral agad yan. Parang ganun, no? On the other hand, there are also some people in the data space na ganyan. No? I may not have a master's, PhD, in whatever, but I get things done. And then the opposite boat, where, well, I studied this, I know the theory, and I know how to execute it. And, and I think it's a spectrum. I guess maybe you choose your battle. Now, if you prefer the credential battle, then go for it.
yep,
But maybe kasi I've always been a more applied person in ever since, no? And And for me, the thrill comes from getting things done, and the delight of seeing something you execute really come to fruition. It's less about putting it in a nice, neat frame, hanging it on a wall, no, and getting things to, or maybe there is some element of ano pa rin, na it's nice to be recognized. Getting some accolades from time to time doesn't hurt. But if you come to a point where that's all you do, chasing awards and such, then maybe there's something wrong there. And again, I can't help but go back to 2020 when the pandemic hit. Then you know it didn't really matter if you got an award or not. It's now, can you survive this thing, no? And that doesn't respect your credential, that doesn't respect your state in life. It's pervasive, no? It just equalizes everyone. And now you have to think on your feet. I think that from time to time you get those shocks na, oh nga naman, knock us back to reality now and start to rebuild from here.
It's interesting. It's interesting you said that because the last thing I read was about ethics, and this is circling back to ethics. And there are many ways to approach ethics, just as we're discussing. One is the philosophical way of applying ethics, and one is the practical way. And when you start using ethics in the context of business, in the context of policy, it's always recommended that you approach ethics in a very practical way, so the practitioner's way of using ethics as opposed to the philosopher's way of using ethics. And the practitioner's way of using ethics is taking into consideration context and cases, and not in theory of, oh, therefore I am, and not, it's not there. It's more in what happened in this situation, what happened in this case, in Rohingya, for instance. What's the ethical perspective in Rohingya? What's the ethical perspective in Auschwitz? So there are cases that help build the ethical recommendation afterwards. So similar to what you're saying, it's a spectrum. You may be informed by theory, you may be informed by philosophy, but it's equally important to understand how does it play out in the real world, the practicalness of it all.
I think it's good nga na you've bridged it now to na, no, no, what happened in Myanmar, no, with the Rohingya genocide. Obviously, that is one thing that Facebook had a lot to do with. Parang this whole idea of having what they would call echo chambers. And it's funny because I remember when Facebook first popped into the scene, early 2000s, no? We already saw Friendster and MySpace. There were already social networks, but then Facebook just caught up very very quickly, and it was a place where I don't know how it differentiated itself apart from it was just a fresh place to establish a network, because Friends everyone was already on Friendster. But I think there was a major shift. I don't know when it was, circa 2008 or '09. No, that was when Facebook started rolling out advertising. Now you can do micro targeting. There was a developer access where you could extract data from Facebook if you were a premium member, you're a business member. And suddenly Facebook became a marketing machine almost overnight, no? And then things got weird, no? And part of what made the Rohingya thing possible, at least one of the many things, is that it was hard to detect because it was an echo chamber. Only the people who, number one, spoke the native language could pick it up. So none of the usual search algorithms would detect these messages being, put forward by the military, inciting genocide. Second, it's only people who were in the immediate circle of that network and like that would continue to get bombarded by it. So it could have been several years before it started to, creep out into the real public domain. And the underlying design of these algorithms, these echo chambers, was for marketing. No, you want to, in a way, target people who are probably already interested in similar brands or similar interests. So the response rates would be higher. So I don't think genocide was ever on the drawing board when they crafted it, but that's the unintended consequence, and that's what we continue to grapple with. No, and it's now tantamount to violating your rights, no? Because you don't know if what you're seeing on your news feed, if you're on Facebook, reflects the truth. No, so I don't know if you have a perspective on that, no? Kasi it's sort of has its one foot in the marketing domain and another foot in the technology domain. And I think even in advertising, no one ever intended advertising to be bad, but sometimes it does become bad. No? So, I mean, I don't know. Any thoughts on that? Sorry if it's a mouthful. No? I'm just
No,
trying
no,
to think about it.
I'd like to. It's I like to be thoughtful about my response because my my gut reaction would always say, well, it's always driven by money, and I don't think that might be a fair response. Uh,
Oh, kasi economics na naman, no? We're
yes,
trying
babalik na
to...
naman tayo sa pera. Yes, and but I guess you have to question. I mean, what I realize is um, the intention was good. It was almost um, it was very harmless, just to connect with, just to create this network of students within this university, so they will know what they were doing. It caught on, became big, and eventually, I haven't read the books, by the way. So eventually, it's about monetizing it. How can we monetize this thing that's fast growing? and and but there are choices to be made there. I don't think that was the only choice. I don't think it was about where they did they explore other options, did they explore other business models, or that was the only business model because that was the secret sauce. We had the data, we know how people think. So this is just me uh, thinking aloud. I'm wondering if you could turn things back and say we have to, and the question on the table is we have to monetize. Is that was the only answer available was then we have to go into advertising? Could there been a tiered offering? Could there have been a subscription offering, like you have your base? And because now looking back, is there are so many business models. Parang advertising was the easiest, and in fact I would say uh, maybe the
Maybe the lowest hanging fruit, no? At that time, no?
I'm going to say laziest kasi hindi na nag-isip ng iba pa. uh, there are many business models. You can create a platform, and now we study platforms. Now we study how we can create marketplaces. Now we study a lot of these things. Was advertising the only thing available at that time? Because I think that was the pivotal point when you decided you were going to use people's data to sell to advertisers. Um, that was where you turned the corner, and when you went down that corner, it snowballed. It was so successful. You're more pop. You have so much power in your hands. There's so much information in your hands, and it becomes extremely seductive to just keep on going. And not to say, hey, wait a minute, are we doing something wrong? It's very hard to check yourself then. So I'm wondering if you could go back in time. Is when was the point when you could have made another decision? Um, or even if you went down the advertising road, did someone say at a certain point, wait a minute, is this right? Is this the right thing to do? Because this is what's being created. So I saw a little clip that about lying, about Miss Miss Cortez asking Mr. Zuckerberg about, will you allow lying politicians to advertise on your platform? And he kept on saying, I had no knowledge, I had no knowledge, I had no knowledge. I don't believe that's true. Having sat on a board, you understand the risks of your company. It's not like you don't know. Those decisions will be made at the board level. Someone will say, we have a red flag somewhere. This is something that we need to discuss. Um, and so I do not buy the story, the narrative that I didn't know about this, because I'm
That's a cop out, no? Such a cop out, no?
well, colored word, but from and I will speak from my experience, risks are flagged on the board level.
I actually, good thing you mentioned that, no? Because I'm normally nowadays in conversations with journalists. No? I sit on the board of a journalist group, no? And many of them are surprised when I tell them that actually even our own advertising standards council, no, will not rule on political ads. It's specific there, no? And people are surprised by that. No? It's governed by a totally different thing. No? Comelec will govern that. And obviously, we know how people game those things. No, like one ongoing loophole is if you're already a candidate, you have to respect the kind of the Comelec schedule for candidates and campaigns. No, but it only applies for those who have already filed their certificates of candidacy. But if you haven't filed anything,
It's
you
open.
you can it's a weird gray area where you're kind of a political ad, but you're not a political ad. And of course, these are structural problems to address now. But political ads are interesting because, I mean, it was just an eye opener, that whole Facebook issue on political ads, and then Twitter made a ruling on it. And then even ASC pala does not meddle with it. It seems like the dark child of advertising, political ads. Did you have a perspective on that back in the day, or I mean, even now, no?
I just know that when everyone was suffering because of the recession, the only agencies that made a whole lot of money were the agencies who were doing political ads.
Correct.
That says a lot
Yeah,
without me saying a lot.
yeah.
Mhm.
And it is, again, follow the money, no? Uh, I don't know if people remember when Cambridge Analytica was around. Their website had two columns in it. You click the left if you want to go to marketing, and you click the right if you want to go to political advertising. It's very very distinct, no? So talagang they're really mirror images of the same thing. It's just a difference of what message you're broadcasting, but the tools are the same.
But this is what democracy is about. It's capitalism is about. It's who's to say we are here moralizing and what is it's all free game, and then we circle back to the ethical companies. We hope that in the future there'll be more ethical companies, people who really embed ethics and and question the consequences of their actions. So we're just starting to go around in circles because we really have no answers. But I will say probably that what built Facebook is what could probably also turn Facebook around.
Hmm.
And that's the millions upon millions of people who are currently on the platform. Um, like I say, our school is nothing without the students. Facebook is nothing without its subscribers or whatever, its members, whatever you want to call it.
You have
Um,
to respect the people first. I mean, otherwise you
and
lose that mandate. I
no,
mean,
what I'm saying is that every single person has a choice, even if they think they don't. When I left Facebook in July last year, I gave up a lot of things. I gave up 3 communities I've built over time. I've given up access to my photos. I wasn't able to download all my photos or all my conversations. I gave up a lot. Um, but that was my choice. I'm not saying people do what I did, but that was my choice. I exercised human agency. And I think that's at the very core, that's what's going to be in danger is that of the ability to make choices. Because if we think we're still making choices out of our own volition, we might have to rethink that. They say Google is the most biased way to do research because it knows you, so it will only serve you what you like to see and read. So you have to recognize that, and therefore you have to start asking questions that Google doesn't expect you to ask. Like if I'm a human-centered design advocate, I will say human-centered design sucks for me to see the other side and to balance my views. And that's where critical thinking comes in. And I think every human being has the ability to become a critical thinker if you choose to be. But it's easier said than done, Doc. That's why I'm in education.
yeah. I mean, ano rin eh, although we're coming close to the hour now, no, I want to make this ano rin, uh, succinct. Besides, we'll have more opportunities to talk in the future. No, can you at least comment lang on two more things? No, you mentioned agency. I mean, human agency. I'm always worried about that as an issue because if there's one thing about the fourth industrial revolution that I don't think we've fully grasped yet is part of that revolution is machines getting their own agency, no? And it's because of data. Like exactly what you said, Google is using your data to serve you results even before you tell it, it already knows. And then eventually we'll have simple robots, complicated robots automating stuff for us. I always get a kick of watching these YouTube videos where you have Google and Alexa playing chess against each other, and they'd be, minsan mananalo si Google, minsan mananalo si Alexa. So we're not that far off, no, from machines getting their agency. um so that's my first question before I go to the second. Any thoughts on that, no? And its implications to us, no? I know it's a bit abstract, no, but I think it's a question we'll eventually face at some point.
Before that happens, we have to realize who has placed that into the neural networks and into human beings. And then it goes back to the inclinations, predispositions, and implicit biases of the human beings who taught who taught the machines how to think. Right? Remember that uh, she a senator, uh, uh, AOC, ACO,
Mm,
being her head being rendered, her body being rendered in a bikini.
right.
So it just shows the implicit bias of the coding of how they that the AI was taught. It starts there. It goes back to that. That's why that card game that one of our students made, I'm so proud of that, even if it's just so small scale. It's just, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it and really say, is this the right thing to do? Now we talk about, we have to protect the whistleblowers. The whistleblowers. Where was that? Was that from Google? The whistleblower of Google, how she's been castigated and
The AI expert,
yes,
AI
yeah,
whistleblower, yeah.
yes, right.
Yeah.
So you see how we are punishing those who are asking these questions, investigating our actions. We are punishing them as opposed to celebrating them and saying this is the right way to do. Now we're they're we're intimidating them. So it's all human. It's all human. Before we get to the machines and start blaming the machines, let's start looking at ourselves first, because there are our creations. If you'd like to take a very anthropomorphic view of it, is they are mirrors of us. They're our creations. So let's look at our intentions first. It always goes back to that. Uh, and yeah, and that's the only. I'm not worried about. I'm not worried about the machines. It's people I'm worried about. The machines will only do what we tell them to do, and eventually they will think and learn from us and see and learn from our greatest triumphs and most miserable failures and like a child, diba? And how different is that from raising a child? Um, the
Yeah,
child
we're educating the machines as we speak, no, by recording videos like this. Hopefully they will see it as
is
you know
part of
as
what is going to be fed into his mouth.
a step in the right direction, no? With our faces on it.
Have to start talking about these things. We don't talk about it enough.
Yeah.
We don't challenge ourselves enough. As Adam Grant said, if knowledge is power, knowing what you don't know is wisdom. We have to keep on thinking and rethinking what we think we know.
Right. Right.
I think that's it. I'm not worried about the machines. I'm worried about the people who make them.
Yeah. Okay. Second question and last one is uh maybe combine any parting thoughts for at least for this podcast that you want to share, and again juxtapose against your own journey. No, you've moved from many fields, now you're in education. So anything you want to kind of impart to the audience, any lesson or any question that you want to leave us with, as we cap off this conversation.
I think COVID has made us reflect. A lot of us reflect about and I hope, maybe not I think, maybe I hope COVID has made us reflect about the value we create and the value we wish to create. And I think there is no better time to move towards creating the value we think the world needs now. Everything, as they said, this is the big reset. We cannot continue where we left off. So, you know, as I say this, I think about my godchildren in agency. I think about my students. I think about my clients, and I know their hearts are all in the right place. They're incredibly brilliant people. Um, to take this time to say, is this what I really want to do? Is this really going to make the world a better place? Is what I'm doing right now really going to make the world a better place for my children? So take this time to think and take this time to act. Wherever your reflections or your introspection leads you, as long as you're moving towards what you feel the world needs. Um, I happen to find it in education. So I wish all your listeners all the luck in the world, and I hope you find what it is that you're meant to do.
Yeah, I don't think we can end on a higher note than that, no. So thanks a lot, Peachy, and for everyone listening, this has been Data Ethics Conversations. No, we hope to have Peachy again at a future date.
Anytime.
Uh, yeah, and there's really so many more things we need to talk about. No, thanks a lot for this brief time.
Thank
No.
you for having me, Doc. It was a pleasure being here.
And that was my conversation with Miss Peachy Pacquing. Did you enjoy it? Here's an instant recap for the highlights. Join us next time for another Data Ethics Conversations.
Let's go meta, or let's go philosophical here. What is advertising anyway? Actually, it's not marketing anymore. It's about getting people to like you in the most authentic way possible, with the least amount of annoying messages. I think we have to go back to the fundamental definition. Like, I think some people still believe digital is a channel. I think it redounds to the values of those in leadership. There are companies that have projected cost of damage, quote unquote. It's okay to commit a sin. Let's just pay for it and then let's go our merry way. Like, I think that the word creativity there is misused or misrepresented, because creativity is the ability to connect things, and if GitHub is any indication, my goodness, I think we have a very narrow definition of creativity.
We will talk to Peachy about the intersection of leadership and ethics, the value of business ethics to corporations, and redefining creativity in the Fourth Industrial Revolution.
There is no room to reflect on the consequences of our actions. So what I'd like to do, what I could do, is facilitate conversation.